The rain wasn't just falling. It was hammering the city like it had a grudge. Cold, sharp, and relentless, it turned sidewalks into rivers and streetlights into hazy halos in the mist. Downtown Chicago, usually buzzing with late-night energy, had emptied out. Office workers had long since fled to warm apartments or packed trains. Taxis splashed through puddles, their red taillights smearing across wet asphalt. Inside a sleek high-rise, a man sat alone in a conference room that still smelled faintly of coffee and stress. He'd just wrapped up a 4-hour strategy session, his third that week, and his shoulders ached from holding himself so rigidly upright. Outside, his driver waited in a black town car, engine idling, windshield wipers thumping like a tired heartbeat. He wasn't used to being alone anymore. Not really. 2 years ago, his wife had been the one waiting with a warm coat and a quiet joke after nights like this. Now, it was just him and his 8-year-old son, who was probably already asleep, back at their penthouse, tucked under a blanket with a dog-eared copy of Where the Wild Things Are. They were still learning how to be a family of 2 instead of 3. He grabbed his overcoat, nodded to his assistant still packing up files, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit him like a slap. Rain soaked through his sleeves before he'd even reached the curb. He hurried toward the car, head down, collar turned up, but then he stopped. Under the flickering fluorescent light of a bus stop shelter, huddled against the glass, was a child. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her clothes were soaked through, jeans dark with water, a thin hoodie clinging to her small frame. One leg was bent slightly inward, held steady by a worn plastic brace that looked too big for her. Her arms were wrapped around her knees, and her face was buried in them, but he could see the tremors running through her body. Not just from the cold, from something deeper, something broken. He hesitated. He'd been taught to be cautious. The city had rules. Don't get involved, don't assume, don't risk your safety. His security team had drilled it into him 100 times. But this wasn't a stranger in an alley. It was a child alone in the middle of a downpour with nowhere to go. He walked closer, slowly, so he wouldn't startle her. "Hey," he said softly, crouching a few feet away. "Are you okay?" She didn't look up. A quiet sob escaped her, muffled by her sleeves. Rain dripped from her hair onto the pavement. He glanced back at his car. His driver had rolled down the window, eyebrows raised in silent question. The man shook his head slightly. "Wait." He took off his coat, a heavy wool one, dry on the inside, and held it out. "Here, you're freezing." Still no response, but after a long moment she peeked out from behind her arms. Her eyes were red-rimmed, wide with fear and exhaustion. She looked at the coat, then at him, as if trying to decide if this was a trick. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. I can't leave you out here like this." She swallowed hard. "I don't got nowhere to go," she whispered. Her voice cracked like thin ice. His chest tightened. He'd heard stories, kids slipping through the cracks of the system, bouncing between foster homes, group facilities, sometimes vanishing for days. He'd donated to charities, signed checks, attended galas, but he'd never actually seen it up close. Not like this. "Do you have family?" he asked gently. She shook her head, then added, "They said I was too much trouble." He didn't ask who they were. He didn't need to. The shame in her voice said enough. Without thinking, he stood, walked to the car, and opened the back door. "Come with me," he said, turning back to her. "Just for tonight. You can get dry, have something warm to eat. No pressure, no questions, just come inside." She stared at him for a long time. Rain ran down her cheeks like tears she couldn't stop. Then slowly she pushed herself up, wincing slightly as she put weight on her braced leg and limped toward him. He held the coat open like a shield against the storm and draped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her whole, the sleeves dangling past her fingertips. She clutched the fabric like it was the only thing keeping her from floating away. Back in the car, the heater blasted warm air. She shivered violently, her teeth chattering. He told the driver to head home right fast. "Do you have a name?" he asked as the city blurred past the rain-streaked windows. "Aisha," she murmured. "Aisha," he repeated, testing the sound of it. Just call me sir for now." He wasn't ready to give his name, not yet. Not until he knew what he was walking into. She nodded, eyes half closed from exhaustion. Her backpack, small, frayed at the edges, sat on her lap like a lifeline. He didn't ask to look inside. When they pulled up to his building, the doorman rushed out with an umbrella. He took one look at Aisha and didn't say a word, just held the door wide. Inside the penthouse, everything was quiet. Soft lighting, clean lines, expensive furniture that looked more like art than something to sit on. It felt sterile, he realized suddenly. Too perfect. Too empty. He called out softly, "Rosa?" The housekeeper appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Her eyes widened when she saw Aisha. Without a word, she hurried over. "Ay, mija," she said, her voice thick with concern. "You're soaked to the bone." She guided Aisha to the guest bathroom, handed her dry towels and brought a set of soft pajamas, Leo's old ones, but they'd do. While Aisha changed, he stood in the hallway, heart pounding. What was he doing? He barely knew this girl. He had a son to protect, a reputation, a life built on control and precision. But then he remembered her eyes, the way she'd looked at his coat like it was a miracle. Rosa came back with a steaming mug of hot chocolate. "She's scared," she said quietly. "But she's strong. I can see it." He nodded. "Can you stay with her for a bit? I need to make a call." He stepped into his study and dialed the number of a friend who worked in child services. "Hey," he said, voice low. "I found a kid tonight, alone, in the rain. She's got a leg brace. Says her name's Aisha. I think she ran away from somewhere." There was a pause on the other end. "You brought her home?" "I couldn't leave her out there. You know the protocol, right? You're supposed to call us first, not take her in." "I know," he said, but she was shaking. She looked broken. His friend sighed. "Okay, don't move her. I'll send someone first thing in the morning. Until then, keep her safe. Don't post anything online. And for God's sake, don't let her disappear again." He hung up, rubbing his temples. Then he walked back to the living room. Aisha sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket now, sipping the hot chocolate. Rosa sat beside her, humming softly. When Aisha saw him, she tensed, but only for a second. "You don't have to stay," he said gently. "But you're safe here tonight. No one's going to take you anywhere until we figure things out." She looked down at her hands. "They always figure things out wrong," she said quietly. He didn't know what to say to that. So he just sat in the armchair across from her and stayed quiet. After a while, a small voice came from the hallway. "Dad?" Leo stood there in dinosaur pajamas, rubbing his eyes. He blinked at Aisha, curious but not afraid. "This is Aisha," the man said. "She's staying with us for tonight." Leo patted over and studied her brace. "Does it hurt?" Aisha shook her head. "Not really. Just heavy." "I've got a robot that walks funny too," Leo said, dead serious. "Want to see it tomorrow?" Aisha almost smiled. Almost. Later, after Rosa helped Aisha into the guest room and Leo went back to bed, the man stood on the balcony, watching the rain finally ease into a drizzle. The city lights shimmered below, endless and indifferent. He thought about his wife, how she'd always said their home needed more laughter, more mess, more life. He hadn't understood what she meant until now. Back inside, he checked on Aisha one last time. She was asleep, curled on her side, the blanket pulled up to her chin. Her backpack sat on the nightstand unopened. He turned off the light and whispered, "Rest easy." Then he went to his own room, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind raced with questions. Who hurt her? Why was she alone? And what happens when the sun comes up? But beneath the worry, something else stirred, something quiet and stubborn, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the kind that came from closing deals or topping Forbes lists, but the kind that came from seeing someone lost and choosing to reach out your hand. Outside, the storm had passed. The sky was clearing. And somewhere in that quiet apartment, 3 people, 2 who thought they were alone and 1 who never should have been, were breathing the same air under the same roof for the first time. It wasn't a solution. Not yet. But it was a start. Morning light crept through the tall windows of the penthouse, soft and golden after the storm. The city below was already humming, cars, distant sirens, the low rumble of delivery trucks. But inside, everything felt hushed, like the world was holding its breath. Aisha woke slowly, blinking at the unfamiliar ceiling. For a second, she thought she was back in the group home, where the walls were thin and the nights were loud. But then she felt the softness of the sheets, smelled the faint scent of lavender from the laundry, and remembered the rain, the man's coat, the warm mug, the boy in dinosaur pajamas. She sat up carefully, her legs stiff from sleep. The brace was still on, but someone, Rosa, she guessed, had tucked a folded towel beneath it to keep it from pressing too hard. On the nightstand sat a glass of water and a small plate with 2 slices of toast, buttered just right. She ate quietly, ears tuned to every sound. Footsteps down the hall. A door opening. Then the boy, Leo, appeared in the doorway, holding a stuffed bear with 1 ear chewed off. "You're awake," he said, like it was the best news he'd heard all week. Aisha nodded, suddenly shy again. "This is Bernard," he said, holding out the bear. "He's good at keeping secrets. And he doesn't snore." She almost laughed. Almost. Leo came in and sat on the edge of the bed, not too close. "Dad says you can stay as long as you need. But people are coming later to talk to you. Social workers, I think. He said they're nice, but I don't know. Mrs. Henderson from school is nice, but she gave me a detention once for drawing on my desk." Aisha looked down. "They're not nice," she said softly. "They say they'll help, but then they put you somewhere worse." Leo frowned. "That's not fair." "No," she said. "It's not." Downstairs, the man stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. His friend from Child Services was on the line again. "We ran her name," the voice said. "Aisha Chen, 10 years old. Placed in state care after her mom lost custody 2 years ago, due to substance issues. She's been in 3 foster homes since. Last one reported her missing 3 days ago. Said she ran off during a therapy appointment. But the clinic has no record of her showing up that day. So they just let her vanish? Looks like it. Paperwork's messy, understaffed, you know how it is." He rubbed his eyes. "She's scared. She thinks they'll send her back. They might. Unless you're willing to step in," he paused. "What does that even mean?" "It means filing for temporary guardianship. It's not easy. They'll investigate you, your home, your background, your finances. They'll want to know why a guy like you suddenly wants to take in a disabled kid you found in the rain." He looked toward the hallway, where he could hear Leo's voice, gentle and steady. "Maybe because it's the right thing to do." There was silence on the line. "Then I'll send the forms, but don't get your hopes up. And don't promise her anything yet." After he hung up, Rosa handed him a cup of coffee. "She's eating," she said. "And she let Leo give her that old bear." He smiled faintly. "That bear's been through 3 moves and a dog attack." "She's watching the birds outside," Rosa added. "Just sitting there, quiet. Like she's never seen them up close before." That hit him harder than he expected. Later that morning, 2 women arrived, clad in sensible coats, carrying folders and gentle smiles. They introduced themselves as caseworkers. Aisha shrank into the couch when they walked in, fingers twisting the edge of Bernard's ear. The man stayed close but didn't hover. He let them speak to her, ask their questions. Aisha answered in short sentences, eyes darting between them and him like she was checking if he'd disappear if she said the wrong thing. "Do you feel safe here?" one of the women asked. Aisha glanced at Leo, who was building a tower of blocks nearby, then at the man, who gave her a small nod. "Yes," she whispered. "Would you like to stay here for a little while we figure out what's best?" She didn't answer right away. Then, so quietly they almost missed it. "Only if he says it's okay." All eyes turned to him. He took a breath. She can stay, as long as she needs. The women exchanged a look. One of them said, "We'll need to do a home check, and you'll have to sign some paperwork. I'll sign whatever you need." They left an hour later, promising to return in 2 days. When the door closed behind them, Aisha let out a long breath she'd been holding. "You didn't have to do that," she said. He sat beside her. "Yeah," he said. "I did." That afternoon, something shifted. Aisha didn't flinch when Rosa asked if she wanted help with her brace. She let Leo show her his robot, a clunky, wheezing thing that moved in jerky circles, and even laughed when it tipped over and beeped sadly. The man watched from the doorway, heart full in a way he hadn't felt since his wife was alive. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It was more like relief, like a door he didn't know was closed had finally creaked open. At dinner, they ate at the big table, just the three of them. Aisha used her fork carefully, her left hand steadying her right. Leo chattered about school, about a science project on volcanoes, about how Bernard now had a special chair next to his bed. "You like mashed potatoes?" Leo asked her. She nodded. "They're soft. Soft is good," he declared. "Hard things are annoying." The man smiled into his water glass. After dinner, Rosa helped Aisha with her evening stretches. A routine she'd clearly done 1,000 times, but never with someone watching with such quiet attention. The man sat nearby reading a book he wasn't really reading, just listening to the soft instructions, the occasional wince, the slow, determined movements. Later, as he tucked Leo into bed, his son looked up at him with serious eyes. "Is Aisha going to be our sister?" He hesitated. "I don't know yet, buddy. But she's our friend, and we take care of our friends." Leo nodded, satisfied. "Good, 'cause I like her." That night, the man couldn't sleep. He went to his study and pulled up everything he could find about guardianship, foster care laws, disability support services. He called his lawyer, who sounded surprised but not unsupportive. "You're sure about this?" the lawyer asked. "It's a long road, and once you start, you can't just walk away." "I know," he said, "but she's already here, and she's already part of this." The next morning, Aisha asked if she could call her old physical therapist, a woman named Ms. Delgado, who'd worked with her for over a year before the last foster home cut her sessions to save money. He dialed the number himself. Ms. Delgado answered on the second ring. "Aisha?" she said, voice cracking with relief. "Oh, baby, we've been looking everywhere. Are you okay?" Aisha nodded, then remembered she was on speaker. "Yeah, I'm safe." Ms. Delgado asked to speak to the man. He took the phone into the hall. "She's behind on her therapy," she told him. "Her muscles tighten fast if she doesn't stretch daily. And that brace needs adjusting. She's growing. If you're serious about helping her, she needs to come in. Today, if possible." "I'll bring her." He canceled a board meeting, something he'd never done without a crisis. His assistant stammered on the phone, but he just said, "Family emergency," and hung up. At the clinic, Aisha moved like she was coming home. Ms. Delgado hugged her tightly, then turned to him with sharp, kind eyes. "You're the one who found her in the rain?" He nodded. "Good man," she said simply. Then she got to work. He sat in the waiting area, watching through the glass as Aisha worked through exercises, standing on one leg, balancing, reaching. She winced sometimes, but never quit. Ms. Delgado praised her effort, corrected her form, and adjusted the straps on her brace with practiced hands. Afterward, over coffee in the clinic's tiny break room, Ms. Delgado didn't mince words. She's smart, tough, but she's been failed over and over. If you're just giving her a warm bed for a few days, don't bother. She needs consistency. She needs someone who'll fight for her, not just today, but next year and the year after that. "I know," he said. "Do you?" She looked him in the eye. "Because loving a kid like Aisha isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up every single day, even when it's hard. Even when she's angry. Even when the world tells you it's not your problem." He thought of his wife, who'd always wanted to adopt. Who'd said family isn't blood, it's who shows up when it matters. "I'll show up," he said. Back at the penthouse, Aisha was quieter than usual. He found her on the balcony staring at the skyline. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Ms. Delgado said you canceled your meeting." "I did. Why?" He leaned on the railing beside her. "Because you needed to be here more than I needed to be there." She was silent for a long time. Then, "No one's ever done that for me before." He didn't say anything. just stood there shoulder to shoulder with her, watching the sun dip behind the buildings. That evening, as Rosa cleared the dinner plates, Aisha asked a question that stopped everyone. "Do you think I could go to school here? With Leo?" The man looked at her. "If you want to." "I do," she said. "I miss learning. At the last place they said I was too slow for regular class. But I'm not slow, I just move different." He made a note in his phone. "Call school district. Ask about IEP, inclusive classrooms." Later, Leo showed Aisha how to use the telescope on the balcony. "It's Dad's," he said, "but he never uses it. Says the stars are too far away to matter." Aisha peered through the lens. "They're not too far," she whispered. "They're just waiting for us to look." The man stood in the doorway, watching them. Two kids, one walking with a brace, the other bouncing on his toes, both pointing at the same patch of sky. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was just surviving. He felt like he was building something real, something that mattered. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be forms, interviews, doubts, sleepless nights. There would be days Aisha shut down, days Leo felt left out, days he questioned if he was strong enough for this. But right now, in this quiet moment, with the city lights twinkling below and two young voices whispering about constellations, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her go back into the rain, not ever again. The days began to settle into a rhythm, quiet, steady, and surprisingly full. Morning started with the soft clink of breakfast dishes, Leo chattering about his dreams, and Aisha slowly unfolding from her quiet shell like a flower turning toward the sun. She still moved carefully, her brace clicking softly with each step, but there was less fear in her eyes now, more curiosity, more trust. The man rearranged his life without making a show of it. He moved meetings to late afternoon so he could take Aisha to physical therapy. He turned down a high-profile speaking event in New York because it overlapped with her first day at the new school. His assistant stopped questioning him after the third canceled flight. She just started clearing his calendar with a quiet nod, as if she understood something had changed. School was a big step. The district assigned Aisha to an inclusive classroom. Smaller size, trained support staff, ramps everywhere, desks that adjusted to her height. On her first day, she stood at the front door in a new backpack, fingers gripping the strap so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You don't have to go in if you're not ready," the man said gently. She shook her head. "I want to, I just don't want them to stare." "They might," he admitted, "but you'll show them there's more to you than what they see." Leo, ever the protector, walked in beside her, holding her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. By lunchtime, he'd already told 3 kids that Aisha was basically a genius at math, and dared anyone to say otherwise. That night, over grilled cheese sandwiches, Aisha said, "A girl asked if I could run. And what did you say?" He asked. I said, "Not like you, but I can think faster." She paused, then added with a tiny smile. She didn't know what to say. He laughed, a real, deep laugh that surprised even him. But not everything was easy. Some nights Aisha woke up crying, tangled in sheets, calling out for someone who never came. On those nights, Rosa would sit with her, humming old lullabies while the man paced the hallway feeling helpless. He wanted to fix it, to erase every bad memory, every moment she'd been made to feel small. But healing didn't work like that. It wasn't a problem to solve. It was a path to walk, slowly, together. One afternoon, while sorting through Aisha's old backpack, the one she'd carried through the rain, he found a small notebook. Inside were drawings, stars, rockets, planets, all labeled with careful handwriting. On the last page, in smudged pencil, she'd written, "I want to be an astronomer. But who listens to a girl who can't run?" His throat tightened. That night, after she was asleep, he called a contact at a science museum. 2 days later, a box arrived at the door. Inside was a beginner's astronomy kit, star charts, a journal, and a sleek, beginner-friendly telescope, far better than the old one on the balcony. When he gave it to her, her eyes filled with tears. "You saw my notebook," she whispered. "I did," he said, "and I think the stars have been waiting for you a long time." She hugged the box like it was treasure. Leo, not to be outdone, declared they needed a space night, so every Friday, they turned off all the lights. spread blankets on the balcony, and looked up. Aisha would point out constellations, her voice growing stronger with each one. "That's Cassiopeia," she'd say. "She's a queen. And over there, that's Orion. He's a hunter, but he's kind." The man listened not just to the stars but to her, really listened. And in those quiet moments he began to understand what his wife had always tried to tell him. That love isn't about fixing people. It's about seeing them, truly seeing them. Then came the call. His lawyer's voice was calm but firm. "The court date's been set. They're moving fast. The state wants to place her in a long-term group facility, specialized for kids with physical disabilities. It's not a bad place, but it's not a home." "What about my application?" he asked. "It's strong, but they're going to question your motives. They'll say you're doing this for publicity, or guilt, or because you're lonely." "Does it matter why I'm doing it?" he said, "as long as I'm doing it right?" There was a pause. "Unfortunately, yes. The system doesn't trust sudden kindness, especially from someone like you." That night, he sat Aisha down in the living room. Leo was already in bed, but Aisha stayed up, sensing something was coming. "They want to decide where you'll live," he said gently. "Permanently." She went very still. "They're going to send me away." "Not if I can help it," he said. "But I need you to understand, this won't be easy. They'll ask you questions. They'll look at everything, my house, my job, even how I talk to you. And they'll ask you what you want." Her eyes filled with tears. "What if I say I want to stay? And they say no?" "Then we keep fighting," he said. "But first you have to tell the truth. Even if it's scary." She nodded slowly. "I'm scared." "I know," he said. "But you're also brave. Braver than most adults I know." The next week was a blur of paperwork, home inspections and interviews. A social worker came twice, once to observe meals, once to talk to Leo alone. "Do you like having Aisha here?" she asked. Leo, without hesitation. "She's my best friend. And she beats me at chess." Rosa gave a statement, too. "This house was quiet before," she said. "Now it's got life, laughter, even mess. And that's a good thing." But the hardest part was preparing Aisha. He didn't coach her, didn't tell her what to say. Instead, he asked her questions over hot cocoa one evening. "What do you like about living here?" She thought for a moment. "You don't make me feel like I'm broken. You just help me when I need it. And you wait when I'm slow. And what would you miss if you had to leave?" She looked down. Leo's dumb jokes. Rosa's soup. The way the light comes in my room in the morning. And she hesitated. "The way you look at me like I belong." He had to turn away for a second to blink back his own tears. The night before the hearing, Aisha couldn't sleep. She wandered into the living room, where he was reviewing notes. "Can we go outside?" she asked. They went to the balcony. The sky was clear, full of stars. "I used to think stars were lonely," she said softly, "because they're so far apart. And now? Now I think they're connected by light, even if you can't see the string." He put an arm around her shoulders. "You're not alone, Aisha." "I know," she said. "Not anymore." The courtroom was smaller than he expected, wood-paneled, quiet, with stiff chairs and 2 bright lights. Aisha wore a simple dress and her brace, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Leo sat beside her, holding Bernard the bear like a good luck charm. The judge was older, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone. The state's attorney spoke first, calm. Professional, listing facts, Aisha's history, the instability of her placements, the structured environment the group facility could provide. Then it was his turn. He didn't talk about his wealth. Didn't mention his company or his influence. He talked about mornings, about how Aisha always leaves her shoes by the door, how she helps Leo with his spelling words, how she laughs when the robot falls over. He talked about her dreams of studying the stars, her quiet courage, the way she never gives up even when things hurt. "I'm not perfect," he said. "I don't have all the answers. But I know this. She deserves a home, not just a placement. A family, not just a file." Then the judge turned to Aisha. "Do you want to stay with this man and his son?" All eyes were on her. She took a deep breath. "Yes," she said clearly, "because here I'm not the disabled girl. I'm just Aisha. And they love me for who I am. Not in spite of my leg, but including it." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, dear." They didn't get an answer that day. The judge said she needed time to review everything. But as they walked out, Aisha held his hand tighter than usual. "Did I do okay?" she asked. "You were amazing," he said. That evening, they didn't talk about the court. Instead, they had pizza on the floor, watched a silly movie, and let Leo convince Aisha to build a blanket fort. For a few hours, they were just three people, laughing, bumping heads on the low ceiling, sharing a bag of gummy bears. Later, as he stood in the kitchen washing dishes, Rosa came up beside him. "She's going to stay," she said quietly. "How do you know?" "Because the world needs more stories like this. And sometimes, the right thing actually wins," he smiled. "I hope you're right." 2 days later, the call came. The judge had ruled in his favor. Temporary guardianship granted, a path toward permanency. When he told Aisha, she didn't cry. She just threw her arms around him and held on like she'd been waiting her whole life to be held. That night, they went to the balcony again. The three of them, shoulder to shoulder, looking up. "Make a wish," Leo whispered. Aisha closed her eyes. "I already got it," she said. And for the first time, the man believed it too. The victory didn't feel like a finish line. It felt like the starting gate opening. With temporary guardianship granted, the real work began. Paperwork multiplied like weeds. Therapists, school counselors, insurance reps, and social workers all needed updates, signatures, proof of progress. The man learned to navigate systems he'd never paid attention to before. How to request an IEP meeting, how to appeal a denied therapy session, how to find a pediatric orthotist who actually listened, but the outside world wasn't as kind as the courtroom. Whispers started almost immediately. A local news blog ran a short piece. "Tech executive takes in disabled child found in rain. PR stunt or genuine act of kindness?" Comments poured in, some supportive, many skeptical. "Rich guys love a good sob story," one read. "Bet he'll drop her when the cameras leave." Another, "Why not adopt 10 kids if he's so generous?" He didn't show Aisha the article, but Leo saw it on a tablet left open in the study and asked, "Are people mad we have Aisha?" "No," he said, closing the screen gently. "Some people just don't understand how families are made." Still, the doubt seeped in. At a board meeting, one of the older investors pulled him aside. "You're spending a lot of time on personal matters," he said, not unkindly but with clear concern. "The company needs your focus." "I'm focused," he replied, "just on more than one thing at a time." But the truth was he was stretched thin. Late nights catching up on work after Aisha's bedtime. Missed calls from his sister who kept asking, "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Even Rosa, usually his rock, warned him one evening while washing dishes. "You can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself too." He nodded but didn't slow down, because slowing down felt like failing her. Then, the unexpected happened. Aisha's birth mother reappeared. She showed up at the penthouse one afternoon, unannounced, wearing sunglasses and clothes that looked slept in. She demanded to see her daughter. Security wouldn't let her past the lobby, but she made enough noise that the man came down. "I'm her mother," she said, voice trembling with a mix of anger and shame. "You can't just keep her from me," he didn't argue. Didn't raise his voice. "If you want to see Aisha," he said calmly, "you go through the proper channels. Talk to her caseworker. Show that you're ready, because right now she's safe, and I won't risk that." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I messed up," she whispered. "But I'm clean now. I've been going to meetings, I miss her," he believed her. Or at least he believed she wanted to believe it herself. But wanting wasn't enough. Not when a child's life was at stake. He called his lawyer. Within hours, the court ordered a supervised visit. Neutral location, social worker present. Aisha was told gently. She didn't cry. She just went very quiet. The day of the visit, she barely ate breakfast. Leo stayed close, offering silent support. At the community center, they waited in a small, sunlit room with toys and books. When the door opened, Aisha froze. Her mother looked older than her years, thinner, but her eyes lit up when she saw Aisha. "Baby," she said, stepping forward. Aisha didn't move. "You left me at the clinic," she said flatly. "You said you'd be right back. You never came." The woman's face crumpled. "I know. I'm so sorry. I was lost." They talked for an hour, halting, painful, full of things unsaid. Afterward, back in the car, Aisha stared out the window. "Do you want to see her again?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "She says she's different. But what if she changes her mind again?" He reached over and squeezed her hand. "You don't have to decide today. Or tomorrow. however long you need. A week later, the mother failed a surprise drug test. The supervised visits were suspended. The caseworker called it a setback, but not the end. The man felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sad for the woman who couldn't hold on to her own life. Relieved that Aisha wouldn't be pulled back into chaos. But the legal battle wasn't over. The state still pushed for the group facility, arguing it offered specialized long-term care. His lawyer warned him, "They're not giving up. They think you're a temporary fix. We need to prove you're her forever." So they prepared for the final hearing, the one that would decide everything. This time, it wasn't just about feelings. It was about evidence. He gathered letters from Aisha's teachers, her physical therapist, even the school librarian who'd noticed how Aisha always checked out books about space. Rosa wrote a heartfelt note about how Aisha now set the table every night because she likes being part of the family. Leo drew a picture titled "My Sister and Me Looking at Stars," and then there was Aisha herself. The night before the hearing, she asked to practice her statement. They sat at the kitchen table, just the two of them. "I don't want to mess up," she said, twisting her hands. "You won't," he said. "Just speak from your heart." She took a breath. "I used to think no one would ever choose me," she began, voice shaky. "Because I walk different. Because I need help sometimes. But here, I'm not a problem. I'm just me, and that's enough." He reached across the table and held her hand. It's more than enough. The courtroom was packed this time, not with reporters, but with people who cared. Rosa sat in the front row. Leo, dressed in his best shirt, held Bernard in his lap like a shield. Aisha wore a simple blue dress, her brace polished, her hair neatly braided. The state's attorney argued that stability came from structure, not emotion. That group homes had trained staff, consistent routines, medical oversight. Then it was their turn. His lawyer presented the evidence, photos of Aisha at school events, progress reports, therapy logs showing real improvement. But the most powerful moment came when Aisha was called to the stand. She walked slowly, gripping the railing, but her head was high. When she sat, she didn't fidget. She looked the judge right in the eye. "Do you understand what this hearing is about?" the judge asked gently. "Yes," Aisha said. "It's about where I get to live forever. And where would you like that to be?" "With him," she said, nodding toward the man. "And Leo, because they don't just take care of me. They see me. They listen when I talk about stars. They cheer when I walk a little farther. They stay when I have bad dreams. That's not something you find in a file or a facility. That's family." A long silence followed. Even the state's attorney looked away, blinking. The judge asked one last question. "If you could say one thing to the people who think you'd be better off somewhere else, what would it be?" Aisha thought for a moment. Then she said, "I'd tell them that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. And they've shown up for me every single day." When she stepped down, Leo jumped up and hugged her. The man had to turn away to hide the tears in his eyes. 2 weeks later, the ruling came. Permanent guardianship granted. Full legal rights. Aisha was his, legally, emotionally, completely. There was no fanfare. No press conference. Just a quiet phone call, a signed document, and a deep breath of relief that felt like it came from his bones. That evening, they celebrated simply. Homemade pizza, Leo's favorite. Aisha chose the movie, something with rockets and talking dogs. Afterward, as they cleaned up, Rosa handed Aisha a small box. "For you," she said, "from all of us." Inside was a silver bracelet, delicate, with a tiny star charm. "I picked it," Leo said proudly. "Because you're my star." Aisha put it on and didn't take it off for weeks. Later, the man found her on the balcony again, looking up. "It's real now, isn't it?" She asked. "What is?" "That I'm home." He stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder. "It's been real since the night I found you in the rain," he said. "The papers just caught up." She leaned into him slightly, a gesture so small but so full of trust. Downstairs, Leo called out, "Can we have space night tomorrow?" "Every night," Aisha called back, and in that moment the man knew. This wasn't charity. It wasn't sacrifice. It was the best thing that had ever happened to him. To all of them. The world might still doubt. The road ahead would still have bumps, therapy appointments, school challenges, moments of fear or frustration. But they'd face them together, because family isn't about blood. It's about who stays, who shows up, Who says come with me and means it, not just for a night, but for a lifetime? 1 year after the rain, the city felt different, not because it had changed, but because they had. The morning sun poured through the windows of the penthouse, warm and steady. In the kitchen, the smell of pancakes filled the air. Leo stood on a step stool, flipping one with dramatic flair, while Aisha sat at the table, her leg propped on a second chair, carefully sketching constellations in a new journal. Her brace was sleeker now, custom-fitted, lightweight, and she walked with more confidence, though she still used a cane on longer days. Rosa moved between them like a quiet conductor, humming as she poured orange juice. "Don't burn them this time," she teased Leo. "I'm a professional chef now," he declared, tongue poking out in concentration. "Aisha says my pancakes are edible. That's high praise." Aisha smiled without looking up. "I said they're barely edible," he gasped in mock offense. "Traitor." The man watched from the doorway, coffee in hand. He didn't say anything. He just soaked it in. The laughter, the mess, the easy rhythm of a family that had found each other against all odds. Later that day, they drove across town to a small park on the city's west side. It wasn't fancy, just a patch of green between apartment buildings, but today it was alive with color. Banners fluttered in the breeze. Kids ran between booths. A small stage stood at the center, draped in blue fabric with silver stars. This was the opening of the Aisha's Sky Adaptive Playground, a project he'd quietly funded, designed with input from physical therapists, occupational experts, and most importantly, Aisha herself. She'd been nervous all week. What if no one comes? She'd asked the night before. People will come, he'd said, because this matters, and they did. Families arrived in droves, kids in wheelchairs, children with walkers, parents pushing strollers with adaptive harnesses. There were ramps instead of stairs, swings with full back support, a sensory wall with spinning gears and soft chimes, and a climbing structure with handrails at every level. At the center stood a bronze plaque. "For every child who dreams of reaching the stars, this ground is yours." Aisha stood near the entrance, gripping her cane, eyes wide. "It's real," she whispered. "You made it real," he said. Leo tugged her hand. "Come on, I want to try the space slide." She laughed and let him pull her forward. As she moved through the playground, something beautiful happened. Other kids didn't stare. They didn't whisper. They just asked, "Want to race to the top?" Or, "Can I try your swing?" For the first time, Aisha wasn't the girl with the brace. She was just Aisha, the one who knew all the best, hiding spots, who could spot Jupiter with her naked eye, who always shared her snacks. He watched her help a little boy adjust his grip on the monkey bars, her voice calm and sure. "Like this," she said, demonstrating. "You've got it." His chest ached in the best way. After the ribbon-cutting ceremony, where Aisha, to her horror, had to say a few words. "Just thank you," she'd mumbled into the mic, "for building a place where everyone belongs." They found a quiet bench under a tree. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, looking out at the playground. "I used to think places like this didn't exist for kids like me." "They do now," he said. She turned to him, eyes serious. "Because of you?" "No," he said gently. "Because of us. You showed me what was missing, I just helped build it." She leaned her head on his shoulder for a moment, just a second, before jumping up as Leo called her over to test the new spinning disc. That evening, back at home, they ordered pizza and sprawled across the living room floor. Leo was building a Lego spaceship big enough for 3. Aisha read aloud from a book about black holes, her voice steady and clear. Rosa brought out cookies for the astronauts. Later, as bedtime neared, the man found Aisha on the balcony again. The city lights shimmered below, but her eyes were on the sky. "Clear night," she said as he joined her. "The best kind," she pointed. "See that bright one? That's Vega. In the summer it's almost straight overhead. I'll take your word for it." She smiled. "You're getting better at this." They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then she said, "Do you ever miss how things were before?" He knew what she meant. Before the chaos, before the legal battles, before the weight of responsibility. Before her? No, he said honestly. I miss your mom sometimes, but not the way things were, because this feels like what we were meant to be. She nodded, as if she'd been hoping he'd say that. Inside, Leo called out, "Are you guys coming? I found the comet." They went in. The telescope was set up in the living room now, easier for Aisha to use. Leo had drawn a red circle around a fuzzy patch in his star chart. "That's not a comet," Aisha said, peering through the lens. "That's the Andromeda Galaxy. It's millions of stars all together." "Whoa," Leo breathed. "So it's like a whole other home?" "In a way," she said. The man watched them. 2 kids, so different, so perfectly matched, sharing a moment of wonder. He thought about the night he'd found her in the rain, small and broken under a bus stop light. He'd thought he was saving her, but the truth was she'd saved him too. She'd reminded him that life wasn't about control or success or perfect plans. It was about showing up for someone when they have nowhere else to go. It was about making space, not just in your home, but in your heart. Now their home wasn't just a place with expensive furniture and a view. It was full of mismatched socks, half-finished science projects, bedtime stories read 3 times in a row, and the sound of laughter echoing down the hall. It was messy, it was loud, it was real, and it was theirs. Later, after both kids were asleep, Leo curled around Bernard, Aisha with her star journal tucked under her pillow. He stood on the balcony one last time. The city hummed below, endless and alive. He didn't pray often, but tonight he whispered a quiet thanks. Not for the money, not for the success, but for the chance to get it right. To love well. To be needed. Back inside, he checked on them both. Aisha stirred slightly, murmuring something about nebula colors. He pulled the blanket up to her chin. In Leo's room, he smoothed the dinosaur blanket and kissed his forehead. Then he went to his own room, not to work, not to worry, but to rest. Because tomorrow would come. There would be school plays, and therapy appointments, scraped knees and tough math homework, moments of doubt and bursts of joy, but they'd face it all, together. And as he turned off the light, the last thing he heard was the soft sound of the city outside, and the even softer sound of 2 children breathing peacefully under the same roof. Home wasn't a place you were born into. It was a place you built, with patience, with courage, and with the simple, powerful act of saying, "Come with me," and meaning it forever. And in that quiet apartment, high above the streets where it all began, 3 hearts beat in rhythm. No longer strangers, no longer broken, but whole. Together,